Are you considering divorce? Are you dealing with it now? Are you on the other side and not sure what comes next? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Divorce Do's and Don'ts Show with your host, Lisa C. Decker.
Welcome, everyone, to the Divorce Do's and Don'ts Show. We're so happy to have you. My name is Marcella Kripe. I am Client Care Manager and the producer of this show. And please allow me to introduce our wonderful host, Lisa C. Decker. Lisa is a certified divorce financial analyst and a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce. Lisa is also the CEO and founder of Divorce Money Matters and the organization that brings you this wonderful show, Divorce Town USA. So welcome, Lisa. What can we expect today?
Thank you so much, Marcella. And I want to talk with you today about, as the school year is coming to a close, many families are starting to look forward to summer vacations. I know I am. And with things opening up more and more around the country, many people are looking to travel a bit this year. So how can co-parents give their children summer vacations and still follow proper parenting plan guidelines? Oh, this is a juicy topic. Our guest today will help us better communicate and cooperate this summer so we can all enjoy the time with our kids. Kathleen Schack is a colleague I've known for many years. I'm so excited to have her on the show. This is such a delightful treat because she is a regular guest here and an experienced licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified Gottman's couple therapist, a certified discernment counselor, a divorce coach, a co-parenting counselor, and a divorce mediator who's been in practice over 21 years here in Georgia. Kathleen, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here to share this information as we go into summertime.
Yes, yes, and yes. You know, it's summer is fun in some respects if you keep the kids busy, right? But it's not always fun when you're trying to do the co-parenting part of things. So I mentioned communication and cooperation. So what are some things that parents can do to make sure that everyone enjoys the summer, including the parents?
Right, and I think it does come down to communication and cooperation. You want to make sure that you are communicating clearly well in advance what you hope the summer is going to look like. And that means communicating with your ex. It means communicating with your kids and trying to put together a picture of how you guys can all work together to have a happy, fun, successful, hopefully smooth summer as the time starts to roll by. And a lot of times that advanced planning, the best thing to do is make sure you have in your parenting plan that there's some kind of deadline where you guys let each other know when you have to inform the other person of what parenting time you want during the summer. So that can be incorporated into people's parenting plans in different ways, but somehow have a deadline in there where if on odd years, mom gets to pick first, or on even years, dad gets to pick first, have it be by a set date. So maybe by March 1st or April 1st that you get to pick your weeks that you want extra time for your vacation. And that helps a lot. So people can plan accordingly and plan around that vacation time that you're wanting. When you think about that, you also need to make sure there's some kind of plan in place if that deadline gets missed. I've had a lot of clients where they have the deadline of the parenting plan, the other parent doesn't necessarily meet the deadline, and then they're wanting certain parenting times. And so you have to have something written into your plan about what is going to happen if the deadline's missed. So it might be that person forfeits first choice, so then they get second choice, or it might be you have a default time that person gets if they don't choose a different time. But make sure you have some language in there that everybody is on the same page about how that whole plan is supposed to work.
Those are great tips. Right up front, just, lay it out and put the contingencies and the consequences out there. I love it. It will save so much angst on the other side. So these are fabulous tips, things that I hadn't thought about. So thank you, Kathleen. So now let's see. What about if you've got things like summer camp or extracurriculars or anything else that needs to be scheduled? How do you handle that in the parenting plan as well?
The best way to handle it is have something written in your plan. If you're at the stage where you're still getting to write the parenting plan, try to have something written in there about agreements on how you guys cover extracurricular activities. And if extracurricular activities fits into summer extracurricular, because as we know, summer camp costs a lot more than soccer camp after school during the school year. So make sure there's language that clearly explains what the cost share is going to be during the summertime for those more expensive activities. Make sure some of that's built into your child support worksheet about care during the summertime. And the big thing is the schedule. So let's say if you have until April 1st to inform the other parent what dates you want, that parent may have had to pick a time, say, in February when they want to have summer camp, because if it's a popular summer camp, you have to sign up extremely early. So y'all have to be flexible with each other as well as you start to grow as co-parents, to realize there's certain dates that might have to change in terms of that deadline of informing each other because of camp deadlines. So try to be flexible with each other some. If there's a camp deadline that's well in advance of that, you have until the last minute on April 1st to claim your time.
And on the flip side, some camps don't post their schedules until almost when school's out. And so you don't have any idea when those are going to be. So yeah, being flexible with each other really goes a long way to making life easier for everyone. And I do want to make a comment. You know, you said building the extracurriculars into the child support worksheet. As the financial neutral with couples, I mostly work as a financial neutral. I see that sometimes in certain cases, it can be okay to leave them out of the child support worksheet, but make sure they go in the settlement agreement. Because if the kids are young and they change activities and it's, you know, only figured for, you know, maybe they're into soccer and then they don't want to play soccer anymore and they want to do ice skating and the costs are different and such, then you have to go get modifications sometimes and such like that. So in certain instances, it can be okay to put it into the language of the settlement agreement and leave it out of the child support worksheet. But that's something you want to consult with your financial professional and your lawyer to see how to best handle those things. So, you know, we can make recommendations, but the lawyer really are going to help us to fine tune all of it. And, you know, this is great because when we work with clients who are working with a therapist like Kathleen, working with a CDFA like myself or another professional, and working with their attorneys, you're really going to get the best outcome. And when everyone is working for the process and putting the children first, it's a much better outcome and a much easier process. So I just wanted to point that out.
If I could too, Lisa,
Sure.
I wanted to mention that Kathleen said something really great about being flexible when it comes to maybe what the kids want to do, like, and that is something that has to we take into consideration as we're developing parenting plans for really young children, keeping in mind that they're going to grow up. And as kids get older, they start to develop their own interests. So maybe one of them wants biology camp, or maybe one of them's really into music. And so if there's not some flexibility in parenting plans to allow for growth in the children, then that can be hard too when you're trying to set your summer schedules, because nobody's agreeing on anything.
Right. And particularly if you have teenagers who tend to want to make their own plans for the summer, or if you have kids who like to spend time with some friends' families during the summertime, then it's really important to communicate with your kids about what are you hoping to do this summer. So you want them to not feel like it's on pressure on their shoulders or leeway on their shoulders to be able to pick their schedule for the summer, but talk with them about what are you hoping to do? Have any of your friends invited you to the beach like they usually do? any idea when that might be this summer? So try to get some thoughts from them about what they're hoping for, so you can help plan summer camps with them, plan summer activities with them, and then work in with your ex, working on when all those things can fit in. And hopefully both of y'all are willing to be open and listen to what the kids are hoping for, take it into account, and then the kids still know you guys make the final decisions, but they'll feel respected and feel like they're part of that process as they get to be older teenagers, instead of having things just dictated to them.
Very good points. Very good. And so how can we work to best inform the other parent so that children are ready for these trips or camps, and, you know, making sure that they've packed appropriately, or, you know, have things that they need? Is there a best method of communication that you like?
My favorite is using some kind of family schedule or some kind of program like familywizard.com. But if you do any kind of communication, whichever way it is, make sure you guys let the other parent know what kind of activity is going to be happening. So if they are going to be swimming, or if they're going to the lake, or if they're going to the beach, the parent who's packing them needs to know to send them with sunscreen and bathing suits and towels, versus if they're going to be hiking for their trip, they need to be able to pack hiking shoes. So give the parent some help by letting them know what kinds of activities you're doing. And it's not because your ex is trying to pry into your life or wants to know minute by minute where their children are going to be. Sometimes it's really just because they need to know what to help pack and what to make present for those kids, so they feel like they're well prepared, and you're not having to think of things at the last second when you've gotten them the night before the flight leaves, in terms of making sure you have all the gear that you're going to need. So that's really important. And if you have a family calendar, sometimes that can be incorporated on there, where people sometimes put it in the Google Calendar of when the different camps are, and pick up times and drop off times. So that's important as well. Oh,
These tips are fabulous. You know, we don't think about all these things, but it's so helpful when you have someone like Kathleen to say, hey, have you considered? I love it. Well, what about if summer changes your usual schedule? Like, how do you maintain a regular schedule, and whether you have to extend time? Like, how do you deal with the transitions that happen over the summer?
I think it's easiest on the kids, and sometimes easiest on the parents, if you maintain regular schedule that first week after school and that last week of summer, that first week right before school. So they are able to kind of make sense of their world and transition out of school time and then transition back into school time. So if you can keep those 2 weeks in particular as your regular schedule, that's great. And then if there's going to be a change to the schedule, you want to warn the kids ahead of time. You want to prepare them for that, kind of be prepping for it, having it sound exciting. If you are one of those people who makes a color-coded calendar for your kids, make sure to make a new calendar that fits the summertime schedule. And also, one thing to keep in mind is some people assume that the schedule is going to be different during the summer because the kids have off school. So some people might be assuming they're going to get the kids a lot more, whereas the other parent might be assuming that it's going to maintain regular schedule. So make sure you check your parenting plan, know well in advance what the game plan is. You've got to know if your 2 weeks of extra time that you get are consecutive or non-consecutive. You really want to have all those fine details ironed out in your parenting plan, so you're not having to deal with attorneys, and instead you can go to the beach and have fun playing with your kids.
Truth.
I wanted to ask you about that too, just regressing a little bit back to the summer camps. Do you ever have someone say, every single summer when it's my time, my co-parent schedules a summer camp? Mm-hmm. Does that happen? And how do you have any suggestions on how parents can better coordinate that, where, if you really want them in that summer camp and that's really something you want for them, maybe you could do that in your time kind of thing, or maybe you could switch with me. I'm just throwing those things out. These are just things I've kind of heard over the years.
Right.
Like every summer during my week, they always get scheduled for some miraculous summer camp, that kind of thing. So how could they better work through that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes up in those conversations that they're hopefully having in the wintertime and in the springtime, where there might be some blackout dates where you say, hey, we're going to be doing something. These dates can't be scheduled for anything else. This is just going to be my time. And hopefully the other person respects that. But ideally, the parent who's scheduling an activity is only scheduling things on their time. It gets kind of complicated with itty bitty kids when maybe they have a 2-2-5 plan or they split the week. And that's something I'm running into currently with some parents is they're with mom Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they're with dad Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So you have to be really good at communicating and cooperating with each other to coordinate, hey, are we going to do a summer camp where you're going to be responsible the first half, and then I'm going to be responsible the second half of the week to make sure they get there. So it does, again, come back down to got to communicate, you got to cooperate with each other, put the kids first in terms of they're going to love this camp, but also have some blackout dates where you make it clear that on your time, on certain weeks, it's just your time.
What do you find? Yeah, absolutely. What do you find are the most common things that cause problems when putting together the parenting plan, whether it's around vacations or elsewhere? I'm just curious, Kathleen.
I think some of the surprise I get from parents is how specific you have to be and how you have to get the fine details written down when you haven't even started living that way yet. And so try to make sure that both of y'all are on the same page about writing down exact times when transitions are going to happen, where they're going to happen, how you're going to handle vacations, and also think about how holiday time prevails over vacation time. That's the other issue I run into with a lot of parents is they want to pick their week, but they want to pick it over the 4th of July, yet the other parent has 4th of July as their holiday. And so then they start getting into arguments about who's going to get it and how that would work out. So you have to think about just chart out the whole summer and look at all the different dates, all the important holidays, and then prioritize what time you want with the kids. But you got to be specific. You got to get those details in there because most of the modifications that come back and most of the arguments that people have on my couch is all about the details and how they weren't clear in the details and how they both translate the details differently. So be as specific as possible.
Yes. And also remember to be flexible because life throws curveballs at us. And, you know, I've heard from many attorneys to be graceful because, you know, if your spouse is asking for an exception because they have a work trip or something else has come up on their week, you know, that hopefully that will come back to you when one of those curveballs hits you, right? Remember that life has them and you need to be flexible as well as have those specificity. Absolutely. Well, this is so interesting. I'm just so happy you're here talking about this topic. So what about these changes? What about, I've heard parents go and make modifications themselves, and whether it's to the parenting plan or to the child support, courts frown upon that. And in the child support, I know you need to get those modifications in writing, but what about the child parenting plan?
I think if you have modifications in your parenting plan, if it's going to be bigger than just, hey, this particular summer, could we switch this or switch that? Then it needs to be filed with the courts. But if it's something where you're just switching, you know, a couple days here or there, kind of playing with the dates, being flexible for that one summer, that 1 week, then you don't necessarily have to file that with the court, but you want to make sure it's in writing. So you want to make sure, even if y'all communicated face-to-face and you totally trust that the other person's going to uphold their part of the bargain, make sure you write a follow-up email that says, you know, just to recap, this is what I think we agreed on. Can you confirm that? Have all the dates and the new times written down. So there's no question going forward what's agreed upon. So always, when in doubt, in any kind of co-parenting situation, have things in writing. Sometimes you need to file it with the court if it's going to be a big change over the summer, but little changes, just make sure you have it written up with each other.
And I think that's a good point for everyone, right? Clarify something in writing after you've discussed something so that there's no doubt about it.
Right.
But especially important in this situation. So what about
so good.
Trap?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Marcella.
Go ahead. I was going to say that's so good though too, that when parents can be flexible like that. Yes, you have a court document that says this is your time for the summer. But if you have a day if you have this awesome trip planned and it's going to run one day into the next week, and the other parent is like, cool, that's no problem, I'll just take an extra day on the back end. That's the best way you could possibly be, because the kids are going to benefit, because they're going to have an awesome trip and they're going to still get to be with both parents. And so I just wish more parents could look at it like that. Like, yes, this is a court document, but these are our kids. So, let's give them the best summer possible between the two of us, kind of thing.
Right. And if you put the kids first, that's the kind of thing that happens. I just had a conversation with some co-parents this week where they were coordinating different flight times and how that was going to have to change some of when the kids are dropped off or picked up. And they did a great job being flexible. And even though they can't see eye to eye on certain things, they understood this trip was going to be really important for the kids. And they didn't want to stress the kids out, didn't want to stress each other out. So they were flexible with changing pickups and drop-offs and shifting by a day or two to make that happen for the kids. And that's ideally what you want to have happen in the end of one of those conversations. Oh, something else to think about too is oftentimes families want to get involved. So extended family is going to want to maybe have some kind of beach trip, or they might want to come into town to see the kids. So if that happens, then if you can get your family to plan ahead, which sometimes is possible, sometimes not, try to schedule that as well in advance as you can, and try to schedule it on your own time. And then if part of that might fall into the other person's time, talk with the other parent about how it's a family event, what it would mean to you if you guys could shift the days a little bit or switch a weekend. But hopefully the other parent's going to be open to wanting extended family to still be involved with the kids and try to make that happen. And try to talk your family into planning ahead a little bit. Let them know how much it makes your life easier to talk to your ex about scheduling when they can maybe try to schedule a little bit in advance too. Good luck with that sometimes.
It's funny you say that, because we have one particular part of our family that just randomly shows up and is always upset because we're never available. and so we're not even talking about kids or co-parents or anything. Yeah. We're just talking about family that shows up and doesn't understand why you can't hang out with them. And so if there's a way we can get our dear families to please understand that we have co-parenting schedules and things that we have to work out between two households. So please respect that when possible.
Great.
Also, a question comes up about how do you communicate with the other parent while they're traveling with the child? Set that up in advance as well?
Definitely set that up in advance. You want to have a communication plan in place. And particularly if it's little kids where they're used to maybe saying goodnight every night on the phone, you want to have that set up that there's going to be phone access, or there's at least going to be email or texting or something where you guys can be in touch with the kids. And if it's going to be an international trip, really some pre-planning has to happen to make sure that there's calling plans that have been set up, or international plans put on at least one person's phone, so that the parent who's home without the kids is going to be able to get in touch. And if nothing else, just say, hi, hope you're having a great time, and just be able to talk with the kids. And the kids will be able to share some exciting things that are happening on their side too.
Very good. Well, I want to ask you about something else here, Kathleen. Hollywood, we see a lot of families who have divorced, and the parents get together, even though they're exes, and travel for holidays together, for vacations together. And it's a wonderful thing. We at least we hope they're getting along as they go along, but it's very good for the children to be able, for all of those parents and step parents and all, to be in the same realm together, to be doing activities together. It's really wonderful when you can make it work. Do you find people are interested in that? Do you have any tips on how they can make that work to be successful for everyone?
I do have quite a few families who still do family vacations, and some of them are newly divorced people. So it's maybe the first summer that this transition's happening. So they think it'll be easier on the kids to do that. If it's maybe been a family trip they've taken for years. And then I've got some other families who've been divorced for a long time, and they still get together and share some holidays. So I think for some families it can work. I think for those families that are able to be friends and they're able to be cooperative and they're able to communicate well, I think those trips can be possible. If it's a high conflict situation, or if it's somebody who's just trying to be controlling or not want the kids to go somewhere without them, they're going to feel left out. That's the kind of situation where you want separate trips. But I think it's good for the kids, for them to see you guys getting along and to be able to see that their parents can put their differences aside to still enjoy some family time together with the kids and to give them certain experiences.
And for anybody who thinks that's impossible, in 2 more weeks, we're actually going to interview a guest who takes family vacations with her ex. It's something that they have developed for their kids. So stay tuned. In 2 weeks, we're actually going to help you see how that's possible with a real life experience.
That's great.
Do you find that these trips, these co-parenting trips, vacations, work best at particular ages of the children? Is that?
I think for little kids, it's certainly good, because for itty bitties, they don't necessarily understand this whole divorce thing, and they don't understand why everybody's not going to the beach or to Disney World like they've done every year since they were born. So sometimes for them, it helps the world kind of just still feel a little bit stable and gives them that sense of family. And so for itty bitties, I think it can be helpful. And then for older high school students, let's say if there's a senior trip that has been a family tradition, that every time one of the kids is a senior, they get to take them on a trip or something. So if you're the third child and then now your parents are divorced, you may still want them to be able to do that trip with you, and you may want everybody together for that. So thinking in terms of maybe what the kids want or what kind of a trip it is. And again, it all comes down to communication. And if the parents can be adults and be resilient and be positive and healthy, if that can happen, then at any age, it's a good idea, I think.
Do teens throw more of a ringer into the mix as they get older?
Teens always throw a ringer into the mix as they get older. That's their job. Yeah, so you want to make sure that the family gets along too, and that the kids aren't going to start like trying to play the parents against each other or make it more difficult if everybody's together. So I would listen to your older teens about what they feel comfortable with, because they may not feel comfortable having everybody on these joint trips. They might want their own time with that parent, or they might prefer to bring a friend instead of the other parent, and that's okay.
So I mean, we've all seen, National Lampoon's Vacation. So we know how family trips can go, just as a general rule.
Right.
So when you start throwing in exes and extended family members and then teenagers, Lord knows how that's going to end up. So yes, we can see definitely communication, especially if you're going to bring in exes and extended family.
And one thing around that I just thought of is, oftentimes during the summer, you might have kids who have baseball tournaments or have some kind of sport or activity that's going to have tournaments involved where they're traveling. And so even throughout the year, I have co-parents trying to figure out, are we going to both go on this traveling trip? Are we going to stay in the same hotel or different hotels? Do we want our rooms anywhere close to each other? Because they want the kids to know that they both care about their activity. They're there to support them in their baseball tournament, and they don't want to stress the kid out during that time. So that's something to think about too, is what is your child comfortable with in terms of staying at the same hotel or staying nearby so they can run back and forth to different rooms. But it's always good if you are able to cooperate again with your co-parent to be able to take those traveling trips for these different special activities so that you guys aren't having to trade off who gets to go to which one. Try not to make it a tug of war over something like that.
So many things to consider. What are some other considerations that should go into the parenting plan? Common things that people might not know about, think about, but what are the essential pieces of it? And then what are some extra pieces that you'd like people to know about in advance?
One thing that I have found that people run into as a complication is how they word the details. So some people, for instance, for summer break, might want certain dates or might want it around certain activities or events as to when a transition is going to be. But I recommend putting in something like release of school or until return to school, or being really specific that way, because let's say one school district, their summer might start on a certain date, but another school district might start on a different date. So if you just have release of school written as when the timing starts, then it doesn't matter what district you end up living in over time. Doesn't matter when they transition from middle school to high school, private school, public school. If it's release of school, everybody's always going to know when that start time is for parenting time. So put in language that can translate into different districts or school types, things like that. Same thing with Thanksgiving, for instance. Even though that's not a summer break thing that we're talking about, but it's one I run into a lot. Some districts for Thanksgiving, for instance, only do Wednesday through Sunday, and then you go back to school. Other school districts do release of school to return to school Friday to Friday, or Friday to the following Monday. So it makes a big difference what your language is in your parenting plan as to whether or not you're going to get the whole Thanksgiving break, or if you're stuck only getting half the break because of how it was written and somebody being stubborn. So again, when you have those where there's a bookends of school on either side of the break, make sure you have it written in a way that you're getting all the way to return to school, release of school. That's a big one, I think.
That's huge, because I have a friend right now whose daughter is in school until June 22nd because they had so many snow days this year.
Wow.
So if you have a date, like my time starts on June 7th, and say you live out of state, there's not really a whole lot that could happen there. She's got to stay in school until June 22nd.
Right. So if it's release of school, then you guys know we have to be flexible here, rearrange the summer because something has changed outside of all of our control that's now changed those dates where they're going to be released. Yeah. It's a good example.
What I'm hearing from all of this is that the devil really is in the details, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's your divorce financial plan or your parenting plan or your settlement agreement, a lot of it comes down to the details. And that's why working with the professionals who are specialists in each of those areas of the details is so important, because we all don't know what we don't know about the other professions. But when we work together, it is so magical for families. And I can't emphasize that enough. Divorce takes a team, and it takes time, and you need to give your team time to put the best plan together for you in all these different components. And this is fascinating, Kathleen. As you were talking about the vacation plan, something else came to mind, and I've never had this come up, but I'm curious. Many people have pets, and do the pets get involved in any of these plans? Do the pets follow the children from home to vacation area to vacation area? Like what happens to the pets? Does that ever come into play?
It does come into play, actually. So some families have it where the pets follow the kids. If that is that child's pet, for instance, or if they know that that's that child's security blanket. If both parents are open to it, sometimes they say, let the pet go where the kid goes. Other times, that's your cat. You keep your cat at your house. It's not coming to my house, and the kid will adjust and figure it out. So it's different for all different families. And I haven't seen it where it's actually been written into the parenting plan about what the pets do, but I have definitely had that conversation with people on my couch trying to figure out, are the kids going to have the pet follow them around, or are the kids going to act independent of the pets? So that is a good question. And then I also have a lot of times where the ex ends up being the one who babysits the pets while the rest of the family goes on vacation, because it's somebody you trust with the pets and the pet's comfortable there.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of exes during the summertime who are watching each other's dogs or cats, and the kids feel great because they know where their pet is while they're out of town.
Oh, that's really nice as well.
Yeah. Comes back down to cooperation.
When it works beautifully. And it takes two people being adults and thinking for the best interest of their children. And that's really what it comes down to. What is in the best interest of your children? So what other tips and tools have you got on your couch there, Kathleen? We want to know.
I think sometimes what I find is that as a parent, you're used to kind of having to plan or kind of having to have some details around your kids' schedules or things that are happening. But my experience has been going into figuring out the parenting plan and me explaining how much detail is needed about those pickup times, drop-off times, locations. People sort of get shell-shocked, and they don't expect to have to think through all of those details. So I think the more that professionals can prepare parents for needing to have some details in mind, needing to figure out, what do you want to do on 4th of July every year? What do you want to do on Memorial Day? What time do you want people to be dropped off? Those are things that are really good to prepare the clients for. And taking the time to really think through what kinds of details you want is important, because if you have a high conflict situation where you guys have to pull out that piece of paper every time there's a transition, you want to make sure you've got timing in there that you're comfortable with and that's very specific, so that you can hold the other person to the times as well. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that people run into. They're just so surprised they have to think of so many details and have them all written down.
I think that's a good point too, Kathleen, because we are seeing more and more parents working well together. I think more and more couples are understanding that we're not breaking up our family, we're just transitioning it into two different homes, sort of thing. So we're both still parents, we're both still we're all still a family, just in a different way. And I think that helps. And so that that lowers conflict most of the time, but it doesn't make the details irrelevant, because we're human. And like you said, sometimes we just forget, or two people can speak things and not hear each other the same way. So having it in writing and having those details, it is important, even when it's a low conflict situation, just because we're human and because we want to work well together for the sake of our kids. So it is good to have a starting point, a reference point.
Right. And people translate things differently. So when you're thinking of how you want to draft the parenting time, or you think you've been really clear and really specific on it, have a friend or your attorney or a colleague or somebody read through the statement to see how they interpret it, because then that'll let you know if they're on the same page, like, oh yeah, anybody might read it as you saying this, this, and this. But if they read it and they seem kind of confused, or they interpret it a totally different way, then that lets you know you need to go back to the drawing board and write it in a different way, so that you're not then having that complication July 3rd, trying to figure it out with your ex when emotions are high and people are wanting to get their way. So make sure you have people double check also some of the wording, because we have our own bias where we sometimes add words in or think that things make certain sense that someone else might not read the same way.
And what you said too just plays into basic personality types. Some of us are detail oriented, some of us are big picture people. And so we communicate differently. And I know my husband and I are complete opposites. So if we were to write a document, I would have to write it in a way that he would understand it, and he would need to write it in a way that I understood it, because we do not communicate the same way and we don't understand things the same way. And I think that's just common sense in any basic document like that, with two different people who see things. Obviously they see things differently, or they wouldn't be getting divorced.
Right. Yeah. And I think also there's the decision-making process that's written into the parenting plan, in terms of if somebody gets tiebreaker decision, or somebody can figure out the extracurriculars, religion, school, medical. Those areas, I think people need to take more time in processing what those categories mean, and really looking at what that means to them, and how important each category is. And if there's language that needs to be added in those categories to really pull out, like this also includes mental health, or this also includes summer extracurricular activities, have it really detailed, really defined, break some of those down, and also make sure that you have it detailed about what sufficient communication before the tiebreaker happens is, because that's something I run into a lot, is the parent with tiebreaker decisions sometimes will send one text that says, hey, we need to figure this out. Here's what I'm planning on doing. And then the other parent might respond back, might not. But then that parent says, okay, well, I didn't hear from you in sufficient enough time. I gave you a chance. I'm now using the tiebreaker. It's like, nope, that's not sufficient communication. So you need to make sure it's defined in there that, sufficient attempts at communicating and finding resolution before somebody pulls the tiebreaker is meeting with a specialist, or meeting with a co-parenting coach, or, meeting with some kind of professional who can help tease out all the details of whatever the decision is. So that way nobody's taking advantage of those tiebreaker choices.
I think too, through all of this, I think we're hearing parenting plans aren't written in a day. This is a process. This is definitely going to take some time. And man, it's easy to see how if someone isn't putting the child's interest first, that this could just go sideways really, really fast. So people like you, Kathleen, are so important to helping people stay on track and staying focused on what's important, which is really their children.
Yeah, we try. And I think especially if there's any kind of mental health issues that either parent has, or any kind of substance use issues, those are things that can be incorporated into the parenting plan in terms of checks and balances and stability and safety and security. So talk with your attorney, or talk with the person helping you with their parenting plan about what those options might be. Because again, you want to protect the kids at all costs, and make sure there's language in there to keep them safe and secure.
And listening to all of this, it goes back to, again, the details of things, and also how the emotions play into this. A lot of people, when they come to see me, say, I just want this over with quickly, right? One of the most common things I hear over the years is, I just want it over with quickly. Let's just get them what they want. I just want out. And that's usually one of the biggest mistakes you can make, because as Marcella said, this is a process. Divorce is a process, and multiple processes. You have the parenting plan process, you have the financials, you have the legals, you may have real estate to work out, and all these other things that have processes within them. And people want to hurry through it, or on the flip side, they can't deal with it. They just put their head in the sand, and they just let their professionals do it for them. And then when they finally look up and realize it's like a train going to hit them, and then they're scrambling, trying to figure it all out. And they may have agreed to things that they don't even understand. So I try to encourage people, no matter what it is in your life, that the things that are important to you, be a proactive partner, not a passive participant. You need to be involved. You need to understand the things that you are agreeing to, so that you can live by them and with them. And that needs participation on all angles. So how do you help parents who maybe get stymied in the process. This is very overwhelming, especially if you're doing all of it at one time: parenting plans, financials, legal. You're running to, different specialists, and it is very overwhelming. Do you have any tips for parents on how to juggle all these balls and keep their sanity and make wise decisions while they're at it?
It is really overwhelming. And I think it's the details that people get frozen over, especially if it's somebody who's not that great at making a decision and sticking with it. So I encourage people to either meet with a divorce coach or get in individual counseling, get in a yoga class, some kind of meditation class, something where they're doing self-care and they're getting support. So if there's any kind of support group they can join, or even just some friends that walk the neighborhood together, it's important to maintain self-care and to try to maintain your sanity, because we're asking you to make these huge logistical, life-changing decisions at the most emotional time of your life. I mean, it logically doesn't make any sense. So you've got to take care of the emotional side, which is about 90% of a divorce, in order to make those logical, sound decisions. So you also need to lean on your professionals and count on them to know what they're talking about, that the advice they're giving you is sound advice and they're not trying to pull one over on you or make it more complicated. So try to give some trust, even though trust is going to be really difficult during this time, and get second opinions if you need to on some information. But I think self-care is the most critical piece, and just taking your time, allowing yourself to breathe. Don't feel pressured by an attorney or by anyone to have to sign an agreement that you don't feel comfortable with yet. For instance, when I do mediations with couples, I do 3-hour meetings and I hold them to that, because I know emotionally everybody is so drained and exhausted by then that there's no way I'm going to have these people do an 8-hour mediation session and then finally they'll just sign on the dotted line because they're so tired and want to go home and get something to eat and go to bed. So I have people specifically do 3-hour chunks so that we'll focus on something, get some things drafted, and then they can go home, they can think about it, take their time to pray on it, whatever they need to do, and then come back for the next meeting where we'll do 3 hours and maybe shift some things up from that last meeting or confirm that everybody's feeling good about it and then move on to the next piece. So you just have to take care of your emotions during all of this and take care of your mental health for sure. That'll make a difference for your kids too. They're going to be as resilient as you are. So if they see that you're doing pretty well, they're going to have less anxiety and be able to cope better too.
Good point. Mm-hmm. I know you do discernment counseling, and I think that's so wonderful. And a lot of people are not familiar with it. Could you talk to that just for a few minutes?
Sure. Discernment counseling, I think, is an excellent tool to use for couples where either one or both people are leaning out of their relationship, but particularly if one person's leaning out and one person's leaning in, and the leaning out person may not feel comfortable going to couples counseling, or maybe they've tried couples counseling and it hasn't been successful yet, but the leaning in partner still wants that person to hear where they're coming from or try to keep working on the relationship. So discernment counseling is helpful because it is just conversations about figuring out a path. So we talk about, do you want to maintain status quo? Do you want to look at what divorce or separation might look like? Or do you want to try to work on it in couples counseling? So we talk about those different paths and what those might look like to each person. And then there's a division between individual counseling time during this process, and then very small amounts of time with the couple together. So really in that individual time, I'm able to understand from that person's perspective why they think the relationship has gotten to that point where divorce is even on the table, and understand why they're leaning out, help their partner then understand in my individual time with them what their partner's trying to explain to them. Like, how did y'all get here? What are you hearing? Where's the, doing some reality checking of, are y'all even on the same page about what your relationship has looked like to this point? And now that you're on the same page, let's figure out what y'all want to do about that. Do you want to try to work on it in couples counseling? Or does it seem like now divorce might be the healthiest option for you guys. Y'all have to figure that out. I can help y'all understand the process. I can make referrals, but let's talk through how y'all got to this point and where you guys want to go with it now that you're on the same page about what's been going on. So sometimes I'm a good translator for people and helping that person, the person who's maybe blocking things out, to really hear where their partner's coming from. And then it helps them discern and make better decisions about what they want to do with the relationship. And it's really short. It's 5 sessions at the most. Sometimes people only come for 3 or 4 sessions if they think that they've made a decision about the direction they want to go in. So it's very concise, gets people unstuck, gets people out of that limbo that's so painful, and maybe for some people is drug out for a year. So I think it's really good in terms of moving people along as well.
And do you find that, what is the decision the majority of the time, divorce or work on the marriage? I'm just curious.
I'm not sure there's too much of a majority. I have found that the pre-screening process is very important, because if pre-screening is not done very well, then somebody could come in just to try to have help telling the other person they want a divorce, and they're not open to exploring the other possibility of working on the relationship. So I think pre-screening can help me figure out, are you really invested in figuring this out and looking at all the options, or are you really already in a place where you've made up your mind and this would just be a waste of time or giving your partner false hope if we have these conversations? So the ones that end up going towards divorce sometimes are because they weren't really open to the process, but also sometimes it's because once they talk through what they have been dealing with, they realize that divorce might be the way to go. But I have a lot of couples who decide to do couples counseling, and they want to give it, one last try. And so I remind them, couples counseling, agreeing to do that is agreeing to try to work on the relationship. You're not saying, okay, I'm in this till, we're 95. It just means that I'm in this 2 feet in to try to work on stuff. And here's the stuff I'm going to take responsibility for working on. Here's the stuff you're saying you're going to take responsibility for working on. And we're going to see how that goes and see if we can make some efforts and changes.
Next week on the show, we're going to hear from another couples therapist who talks about how fun he finds couples therapy can be.
It's
and
fun.
So we want to throw that out to you, because we've got this stigma that couples therapy, it's knockdown, drag out, it's horrible, and it always ends up in divorce, or one person hates the other. So is it true? Is couples therapy fun?
It can be fun. It can also be challenging. I mean, I love doing couples counseling. I love trying to help couples figure out how they've gotten to a certain place and help them figure out how they can turn things around and make things healthier. So it might be fun for me, but for the people going through it, I think at times it can be fun based on some of the activities we have them do, especially if we're doing strength building activities and having them work on fondness and admiration and going on dates. So they love those components. They love hearing things that their spouse appreciates from them, because oftentimes spouses forget to say that out loud. But then you also have the sessions where it's going to feel tough and it's going to feel exhausting, but hopefully it's a good exhaustion, because we're helping you work through things in a different way. So it's not the same argument you have in your living room couch. It's hopefully a lot more productive and constructive, and you're understanding and hearing each other. So even on those days where people feel exhausted, they still, I think, appreciate the process and they can see that it's making changes.
It's great. It's easy to see how, even if you work with a couple that decides to get divorced, how you would be able to help them go from that to successfully co-parenting together, because they've already been working together all this time, even if they end up getting divorced. So it should be an easier transition for them that way.
It is. It's much easier.
I'm curious, as we are winding down the show here, and Marcella, you'll let us know. I think we're coming to the end, and we could talk all day about this. But one thing that we didn't talk too much about is, how much involvement do you give children in the parenting plan? I would imagine that has to do with their age and their maturity level. But what part do children get to play in the formal putting together of this agreement?
I think if they're older teenagers, it's important that the parents are listening to them about what's important to them in terms of where they feel maybe safest or where they feel more calm, or listening to what they're hoping for, again, about how things might be. And then the parents need to balance that with what they know from their years of experience about what might be the healthiest thing for the kids. So if the kid is saying that they want to go spend full time with the fun parent who has never disciplined, then the parents know, like, okay, that might not be the best option here. We'll take that under consideration, but we're going to balance that out with other information that we have. So it's good for older teens, get their input, hear what they have to say, because again, they can throw a wrinkle in things if they're unhappy, and they can make people's lives miserable if they end up with a parenting plan that they're completely against. So incorporate their opinions, and also remind them that it's going to come down to the parents making the final decision, but they wanted to be respectful and hear their opinions on it, and then talk through with them why it ended up a certain way, potentially. But with younger kids, the parents make the decisions. Like, I don't even like it when parents bring up to the kids that they're having to make all these decisions and weigh all these things, because the kids start to get really anxious or feel like they have to convince a parent of something, or feel like they have to be good for that parent to want time with them. So younger children, I wouldn't enter that conversation at all.
How about the complications of bringing a step parent into things? Does that ever get brought into a parenting plan?
Yes. So yeah, I think we could have a whole nother meeting on step parents and how that involvement happens. But sometimes, well, when a divorce first happens, oftentimes people want to include that morality clause in their parenting plan or in their settlement agreement that says certain things about how the kids wouldn't be around a certain person until they'd been dating them for a certain amount of time, or unless they're engaged or married, that nobody would be spending the night. So you have that component of how comfortable are the parents with potential new partners. And then as somebody gets remarried, sometimes there might be changes in how comfortable the kids are at that home, or if they get along with the step parent. So sometimes things need to be reevaluated based on how the kids and that step parent are getting along in terms of what parenting time might look like, and if things need to be shifted or not.
Oh,
so it comes into play at different levels.
And I would imagine also with step siblings, could also throw a ringer in there who might get along well with the step parent, but then maybe have some conflicts with step siblings. So multi-layers here, folks. And that's why we have professionals like Kathleen. Dear friend, you are doing great work in the world, and we are so happy that you joined us here today, because you are really putting out some incredible information. And maybe we will have to have another show on step parenting and tips for tools for step parents in the transition. So that hang on to that thought, folks, and anything that you wish to know about while contemplating in the midst of or post-divorce that you think would be a good topic for this show, reach out to us through divorcetownusa.com. We would love to be able to create something that helps you with those needs. Kathleen, any final words here? I think we are winding down. Is that about right, Marcella, on the time?
Yep. We're just about out of time. Any last words, Kathleen?
Thanks for having me. Remember to communicate and cooperate with your co-parent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I can go ahead then and just share a couple of resources with our audience today before we close out the show. Let me just make a couple of things available for you to see on your screen. So here we have the Divorcetown Roadmap. There's lots of different options here. One of the very first things you'll see is Kids First Parkway, which goes right along with our show's theme today that Kathleen has helped us with. So please take a minute to go to divorcetownusa.com, download this ebook, and choose the option that's best for you and your family. Also available on divorcetownusa.com are articles, professionals that we know and we trust, and also our marketplace, which will bring you popular tools and resources to help you through this process. We also would like to let you know about the free divorce financial fitness kit that is available at divorcemoneymatters.com. This kit will help you get to know your finances better and help you get organized so that you can have a more smooth divorce and better choose your team as you go forward with this process. Mm-hmm. We also want to make you available of the Divorce Help and Hope Support Group, which is also sponsored from Divorcetown USA, and it is available at meetup.com. Or you can just go to Divorcetown USA, go to the event section, and you'll be able to connect to the next meeting from there as well. Finally, we want to let you know what we have coming up next week. Next week, we're going to talk about helping our children be happier, healthier, and more resilient. And we'll be doing this with special guest Emma Lou Penrod. And she is a fellow win-win host. She has another channel here on the show entitled Healing Your Families. So please join us for that next week as well. As always, we want to thank you all for joining us today. We are so happy to be able to share this special information with you. Thank you again to our host, Lisa, and thank you so much again to Kathleen. We appreciate both of you very much, and we'll see all of you next time. Same place, same channel. Thanks a lot, folks.
Bye-bye.